Begin Podfix Network transmission. In 3, 2, 1.
Whether you're fly fishing in a stream, getting those ankles wet, or deep in the ocean casting nets, fish nerds. Fish nerds. Fish nerds. It's a podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Fish Nerds, a show about fish, fishing, and eating fish. I'm Clay Groves, Chief Executive Fish Nerd, licensed fishing guide, and your best friend. Today on the podcast, it's going to be a ton of fun. Got just two little things to do with you tonight. The big one is we're interviewing Zeb Hogan. Zeb Hogan just wrote a book called Chasing Giants in Search of the World's Largest Freshwater Fish. Really exciting. And I have a very important news story and exclusive interview for you during our news today. So we're going to jump right in to the news first, and then we're going to get into Zeb Hogan with Chasing Giants. We'll talk all about that in just a minute. First, the news.
News, fish in the news. Everybody loves their fish in the news.
And I'm very excited right now because in the news this week, or actually last week it happened, 13 days ago actually, to be honest with you, this happened. A massive research initiative to explore deep-sea creatures brought discoveries to light in the northern Pacific Ocean last year when scientists filmed and captured 3 fish at the depths never recorded before. And I feel super lucky because with me today, I have an exclusive interview with the world's deepest fish. Please welcome to the show, the snailfish. Settle down. Snailfish. Wow. How does it feel to be discovered as the world's deepest fish?
Well, actually, being discovered is more like a metaphor for someone opening a door to a world that's never before been seen.
Oh, okay. Not quite what I meant by that, but thank you, snailfish. So it took 10 years in a collaborative effort between University of Western Australia and the Tokyo University of Marine Science and Technology. Scientists used baited robotic cameras to film young snailfish at about 8,300 meters below the surface. What's it like when you first saw those lights?
Just like when you're near death, one just swims towards the light. But as I wasn't ready to die, I almost swam away. It's like the great philosopher Woody Allen said, "It's not that I'm afraid to die. I just don't want to be there when it happens."
Okay, well, thank you, world's deepest fish. That was enlightening. All right, so they found you 5 miles down, and they haven't yet named your species yet. And by the way, when they found you, they found you by putting bait on hooks and attracting you in. Tell us, who are you?
I am the winter of your discontent. I am someone, and yet I am no one. I was once seen, and then I disappeared. I am the peanut butter to my own jelly. I am the rhyme to my own limerick. But you can call me Frederick.
Okay, Frederick, thank you for that. And thank you for your time, Snailfish. I think it's really exciting that they found you. And I also think, don't mind me saying, that you are super cute.
It seems like a shallow way to think cute. Remember what Confucius said? Everything has its beauty, but not everyone sees it. And you should know better, Clay. You are going to cause me to have an existential crisis, and now I bid you adieu.
But wait, before you go, I've got some more questions.
I bid you adieu.
But I have more questions.
Adieu. Good day, sir. Good day, sir.
Well, all right, there it is. That was the world's deepest fish, and that was Fish in the News.
News, fish in the news. Everybody loves their fish in the news.
Remind me never to interview a fish again, because that was a rough one. All right, so next up, and by the way, just if you were a listener to other podcasts, after I came up with this idea, I heard the same bit done differently on a different podcast, so it's hard to be original sometimes, but it was on the Pod Save America, I think, and they did the same interview with the world's deepest fish. But I had the idea, and then I heard it, and do you not do the idea, or do you just do the idea anyway? So I did it anyway, but I'll give some credit to the Pod Save people. All right, let's talk about the next segment of this podcast, Chasing Giants in Search of the World's Largest Freshwater Fish. Brand new book by Zeb Hogan from National Geographic. I got a chance to talk with Zeb last week all about his brand new book. So we're going to play that interview for you now, and you can get that book right now on Amazon. Okay, fish nerds, we're very excited because I'm here with Zeb Hogan, who hasn't not out yet. New book's coming out this month called Chasing Giants, the search for the world's largest freshwater fish. Zeb, how are you?
I'm great. Glad to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm at a little deficit. I haven't actually heard of you. I don't watch a lot of television. I don't watch fishing shows. And so I hadn't heard of you before. And I found out after I read your book, while reading your book, that you had a National Geographic TV show. And then you went on this big epic angling quest. And the reason it's exciting for me is, I'm not sure you know much about the fish nerds, but we started off as an epic freshwater angling quest. So we have that in common. We started off as a quest to catch and eat every kind of freshwater fish in the state of New Hampshire.
Wow. How many different kinds of fish is that?
There are 48 freshwater species of fish in New Hampshire that you can legally catch. So there's some fish that are protected, so you can't catch them anymore. So
wow, that's amazing. I already learned something new about fish that I didn't know. 48 species.
Yeah, there you go.
That's about the same number. I'm in Nevada right now. I'm a biology professor in Reno, and we have about 48 here in Nevada.
Right, and it's funny because you go out to the Midwest and you get like 200 and change, like in Minnesota, Michigan, stuff like that. But when the glaciers came through New Hampshire, if you couldn't, head out to the ocean or burrow down in the mud for years and years, it was just game over for you. So the numbers are really low. Those aren't 48 native fish. There's only about a dozen native fishes. The rest are all introduced over the years. So it's really a small number.
You must have been eating a couple small guys.
Oh, well, the smallest fish we ate was a northern red-bellied dace. It was about 1.25 inches long.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And we caught the state record channel catfish during the quest too. So we got the biggest fish and the smallest fish in the same quest.
Which is how big?
It was about just under 13 pounds.
Wow.
And the record's been broken since then, but we got to kill the
channel catfish. Man, those channel catfish are everywhere.
They are, and they're new to New Hampshire. They've only been here about 8 years. They're just people drop them up, and they can live anywhere. They don't care. But we're here to talk about your big fishing quest. You were on a quest to find the largest freshwater fish in the world, which is pretty amazing. And before I read the book, I was trying to imagine what the biggest freshwater fish could be, and I landed on I was guessing sturgeon. I'm thinking, okay, well, how are you defining freshwater fish? Are you counting anadromous fishes, which will increase in number more? Are you counting sharks that can be sometimes in freshwater? So before we get too far, why don't we just start by defining your quest? What is a freshwater fish in your book?
Yeah, the search started when fishermen that I was working with as part of my PhD research, fishermen in northern Thailand caught a 646-pound Mekong giant catfish.
I've seen the picture of this thing. And so big.
Yeah, you can. It'll pop up on Google. Google, world's largest catfish or whatever. But that's what started all of this. I was doing my PhD research, and the fishermen up there, they have a long tradition of fishing for these big catfish. They caught this 646-pound fish, and I asked what I thought was a simple question, which is, I didn't even, it started out kind of as a fluke, but is this the world's largest freshwater fish? What is the world's largest freshwater fish? And the fishermen there had been keeping records of their catches for since the 1980s. It was the biggest fish they'd ever caught, and they catch these things every year. Mm-hmm. And then kind of news went around the world of this big catch, and I was expecting to hear stories from other parts of the world of bigger fish, but there was nothing. So the important qualifier, you brought this up, is that the focus is on fish that live their entire lives in freshwater. And so a lot of people say, oh, well, like beluga sturgeon, white sturgeon can get a lot bigger than 646 pounds, which is true. White sturgeon get huge on the Pacific, in the Pacific Northwest. Beluga sturgeon get even bigger. I think the record beluga sturgeon is 4,000 pounds. Jesus. From Caspian region. So there are fish that you can find in freshwater that get bigger. For my search, and my research is actually my research topic as well as a biologist, is fish that spend their whole lives in freshwater.
Right. Well, that's an important distinction. We forget about the migratory function of fish, and when fish go to the ocean, they eat so much food, they can just get so much bigger. Even freshwater fish, that we have in the United States. If you look at rainbow trout versus steelhead, when the steelhead or sea run, which are the same animal, they become huge, and it's exactly the same animal. So it's a good example of that difference between freshwater and anadromous. So really cool way to define it.
Fish do seem to have access to more resources when they connect with the ocean. It also turned out to be an important distinction for a couple other reasons. One is because not very much research has been done on these big freshwater fish, whereas more research has been done on sturgeon and on big ocean fish. For whatever reason, a lot of these big freshwater fish have not been studied. The other important thing was that there had to be a limit in terms of the number of fish. And so I was interested in fish in freshwater that get more than 6 feet long or weigh more than 200 pounds. And that there are about 30 or 40 species of fish that get that big. So there had to be some limit to the number of fish I was going to go out and try to find.
Good. And now, so now you're defining your quest. You know what a freshwater fish is. You know the roughly number of fish you want to fish for. This is so familiar to me. And then your technique, did you have to were you open to any technique for catching this fish, or were you really specific about, I want to make sure we don't kill the fish, or how was your
all catch and release? Although I think maybe it might have differed from what you did a little bit.
Well, I killed them all. I had to eat them.
Yeah, it really differed from what you did. You ate even the 1-inchers.
Yeah.
So it wasn't me catching them. I just wanted to verify. I wanted to learn about them. So as soon as I started researching this topic, like fishermen obviously love to tell stories. And so I thought there would be a simple answer. What's the world's largest freshwater fish? I went online. I found 20 different people saying 20 different kinds of fish were the biggest. 90% of those stories weren't true. And so for
You're saying that fishermen lie?
Exaggerate or pass, stories go from one person to another and the fish grows every time. So it wasn't about catching it for me personally. I just wanted to see it. So I would go out with local scientists, go out with local fishermen. Some of these fish I caught myself. Some of them were caught with nets. Some of them were caught electrofishing, whatever. For me, I wanted to verify, hey, this fish exists. It gets this big, and just learn about it. And then most of these fish need protection or endangered, so wanted to kind of figure out how to better protect them.
And by highlighting them, you kind of make them, more cuddly, more attractive to the public, and so that really helps them a lot. So it's really good. And congratulations just on being able to fund this. I mean, this is an expensive endeavor, and you were lucky enough, or you earned it. I don't know if you were lucky or earned a combination of both things, but you earned funding to get this going. How did that? I'm really curious. How did you get the funding?
The initial funding came from National Geographic. National Geographic, a lot of people have read the magazine or heard of the TV show, but they've funded over 10,000. I think they're up to 15,000 grants that they fund for explorers and scientists. And so I received my first National Geographic grant, I believe in 2002, and it was $10,000 or something. And it was the just initial funding to get this work going. I reapplied for more funding. We started doing the television shows. So one thing sort of led to another. Everything kind of happened independently of each other. The research the shows were based on the research I was doing, but they were funded separately. Each of the shows had its own budget and kind of was done independently of the research. So it was very lucky to be able to do this. Not very many people have done this type of work. And I don't think it's because people aren't interested. It's just because it's hard to find the money to do it. Marine biology, this is kind of one of my, it's not exactly a pet peeve, but I wish there were more resources for this type of work. Marine biology, it's just inherently a global issue. There are whole organizations, divisions of government focused on marine studies, and we just don't have that for freshwater. We're very locally focused on our own rivers and lakes, which we should be, but it means that there aren't the resources for global work, and that's a shame.
Well, you brought a lot of light to it, which is really good. Now, incidentally, I once had a contract with Nat Geo to do a reality TV show, but I got fired because I wouldn't participate the way they wanted me to. They were making a show in New Hampshire called The Ice Holes, which was supposed to be a cultural look at of ice fishing. but it turned out to be a scripted reality show, and I got fired because I wouldn't get drunk on camera because I was a teacher. I'm like, you're not paying me quit your job money for this. So.
Yeah, TV. I only have experience with the Monster Fish, which is the television show I did with National Geographic, but it's a strange,
so weird
feature. Yeah, I mean, our shows were not scripted,
right?
But they were. What did they call it? It's called a beat sheet or something.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, it is scripted in the sense that there is a document written before we do the show that is a show.
Right. So they can plan the shots they're going to get and they can know the arc of what they're doing.
Nothing actually happens. We don't know when we're going to catch a fish.
Right.
So nothing, I read one of these, I don't know if it's called a treatment. I should know this stuff, but I got into television as a biologist. I didn't get into television as someone who knew about television.
Right.
But, there were these documents and, Zeb catches a big stingray. He's wrestling with it, all this stuff. Like, it was all written before we even started filming, and none of that happened that was in that script.
Wishful thinking.
But it was just so that everyone kind of understood, hey, this might happen. Where's the camera going to be? What are the story lines that we're interested in? So I didn't mind it. When we first started filming, it was hard. And the hardest thing, there were examples like what you're talking about where something would happen that just didn't feel right. But that was rare.
Right.
And that happened less and less as you get to know the team. And everyone has the same expectations. By then,
build trust.
We filmed 30 shows, and by the end, it was the same team every time, and we knew each other, and we knew where our comfort limits were and stuff. But what was hardest for me when we first started was that if it wasn't filmed, it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when we first started filming, we only had one camera. And so, for example, when people would meet each other, I would meet a fisherman that I'd known for 10 years, a friend. And I'd walk up to him, I'd say hello. It already felt weird because they were filming it. And then I said, oh, hey, hi, nice to see you again. And then they said, okay, do it again.
Right.
And they had to film it the other way. And I was like, I can't say hi to this guy again. Like, that's stupid. But it was necessary.
It is.
So it took me a while to get used to that.
Yeah, but it's still cool. I mean, it's neat. And congratulations on getting the book out, too. I mean, just the act of writing a book is such a huge challenge. So pretty amazing. What I found shocking about your book, because, again, not knowing anything about you or what you were up to, I saw the title Chasing Giants. I'm like, great, another big fishing book. We can be talking about striped bass or something like that, which I don't find very exciting. Catching fish is fun, but I don't usually find... not interested in how to catch the biggest fish. I was surprised, and I shouldn't have been if I'd done my homework on you, how science-dense your book was. It is a science book in a lot of ways. There's so much fish history in there, taxonomy, and I found that really fascinating because I did not expect that, and I had to slow down my pace of reading quite a bit to keep in the book. Yeah,
we wanted to be engaging, but to my knowledge, there is no book that provides the science of these fish.
Mm-hmm.
So there are all these fascinating, amazing, big freshwater fish all over the world. And I don't think there's been a book written about them. And so that was the objective, was to introduce, what are these fish? Where do they occur? How did they evolve? Why are they important? What threats they're facing? And then what can we do to protect them? So I'm a biologist. I'm at the University of Nevada, Reno, and so we definitely, and I'm a biologist first and an angler second, or maybe even third. So right. The emphasis is on the science. And the book shows that too, which is really great. I appreciate you doing that. It's because it's important people learn some stuff. And it kind of got into it right away with the arapaima. And I mean, I learned I thought I knew about the arapaima. I read some other books. I interviewed Emily Voigt, who wrote The Dragon Behind the Glass. So I thought I knew a lot about arapaima, but then, her book is a different story arc than yours. So yours is science. And I learned a lot more. And I didn't realize the arapaima can't breathe underwater. Yeah, all the air breathers. Yeah, fascinating. And I guess they're fish that way as well. It's an adaptation. Mm-hmm. So they can survive in environments where other fish can't. But we learned, I don't want to say we learned the hard way. I'd like to think we didn't kill any fish. But after you catch them, they, like most fish do, they get tired, and you have to hold them up at the surface of the water until they start gulping air again, or they can drown. And so,
Well, it's a whole different catch and release than we would for a trout, where you're holding it underwater. You got to hold these up where they can actually catch a breath.
I mean, on the surface, you know,
Right.
not totally out of water. And I think where we learned that, actually, we did film and fish in the Amazon and in Guyana, which apparently has. I've talked to some biologists who think that the record fish is actually in Guyana, but there are these fishing ponds in Thailand where they stock fishing ponds with 100 different species of the world's largest fish. And those fish in those ponds, they're beautiful big fish, but they're also they're valuable to those the operators of the fishing ponds. And so they require people who fish in those ponds to handle the fish very gently. And one of the rules with the arapaima is you bring it in, and then you have to hold it on the surface for like 10 minutes until it's swimming again and gulping air, and then you can release it, because they've had a bunch of them die.
That's crazy. Well, let's talk about the arapaima since we're there. That was one of the early fish in your quest. Was the arapaima? You were talking about how big they can get. How big can they get?
That's a good question
That you know of.
So, I mean, yeah, the biggest one I've heard of is about 500 pounds, 10 feet long, 500 pounds. That's the biggest verified arapaima that I've heard of. That was caught in Brazil. Colleagues with another professor named Donald Stewart, who's an arapaima expert. And he believes very strongly that the largest arapaima are in Guyana, because they're different kind of body shape. They're stockier.
Mm-hmm.
And so he thinks that the really big ones are in Guyana. Arapaima is an interesting fish. So it's more than one species. So new species have been described recently. And it's also a fish that it's easy to overfish. They have to come to the air to breathe. So they're easy to target, like traditionally with spears and things. And so up until recently, arapaima populations were overfished. You didn't see the really big ones. But the last 10 or 20 years, there have been a lot more protection and communities protecting their arapaima populations. And so they're starting to get bigger, and the fish that are being caught are starting to get larger. So we'll see. People like to joke with me. I have my own view of, the world's largest fish, but there are a group of people out there that think that the arapaima is ultimately going to be the biggest.
Right. And what I don't want to do on this podcast today is give away the answer to the book, which is the biggest freshwater fish in the world. I want to save that for the readers. But let's say someone catches a bigger fish than the one you caught. That's the biggest in the world. Would you be excited about that?
Oh,
or
I would be so excited. I would be so happy. It's not the point, but it's what it represents. If it would represent that people care, that someone's paying attention, that fish don't get that big unless there's a healthy population. So the book, I'll give away a little bit. The book starts with the catch of the 646 pound catfish, which was the world record at that time. It took 20 years to find something bigger. So anyway, if it hadn't taken that long, or if there had been 100 fish bigger than that initial fish, that would be good. That would be good for everyone.
Right.
So the fact that it took so long is maybe not that good. And if I heard tomorrow that there was a bigger fish out there somewhere, I would be so happy.
You'd be thrilled. Now, that one of the big challenges with this is confirming the weight of the fish. You're getting these huge fish, and they become so massive, and you've got to find a way to weigh them without killing them or stressing them too much. And there's a lot of stories in your book about how you do that. Some of the rays you caught were having babies while you were trying to weigh them, so that impacts that. Can you just run down some of the challenges you had with weighing some of these fish?
Yeah, the main challenge is that we don't want to hurt the fish. And so those rays that were having babies, that's a stress response. And so they're...
Imagine you're stressed. Every time you stress, you have babies. Hard day at work, another baby.
Yeah, you don't want that to happen. So I'm pretty sure we actually did catch bigger fish, fish that would have been the record that we just didn't have a way to weigh safely. But yeah, I think that's actually the one qualifier about me being thrilled if the record was broken, is that if the record was broken, probably whoever, the fish would probably end up dead. So that's the biggest challenge, is how do you weigh a 600 or 700 pound animal, especially a fish that lives in water, how do you weigh it without hurting it? And that's quite hard. So we tried all different kinds of things. We had a crane. In Thailand, you can do amazing things. It's just easier and cheaper over there than sometimes it is here or in the US. And so we hired a crane for like $100 a day. And we actually had the crane drive up to the river and, be able to lift the ray quickly out of water and weigh it with the crane. And so we tried that for a few weeks and didn't happen to get a big one during the time when we were doing that. But it's a challenge for sure.
Yeah, one of the things I connect with in the book is, and I thought you were going to fail on your quest. There was a part in the book where you were catching, I think it was a giant ray, and you didn't have any way of weighing it. You weren't prepared to weigh it. It reminded me of my quest when I failed to get all 48 fishes. I didn't get them all, and I started going, oh, come on, Zeb. And I started feeling this feel of like, what are we going to do? And then luckily there's like 50 pages of book left. So I was like, okay, there's gotta be resolution here somewhere, but take us through the feeling and the time when I think it was a ray, right? I'm not wrong.
Yeah. The one that we couldn't weigh. Yeah. It's the thing about fishing. And people who fish will appreciate this. People who don't might not, but you don't know. You don't know what you're going to catch.
No, you can't control that part.
I guess sometimes you do, but like we're out there looking for the largest, rarest fish in the world. We have no idea what's going to happen, and so sometimes we would be prepared. When we were prepared, we wouldn't catch anything. When we weren't prepared, we would catch something. So it's just you just don't know. And I think I was trained. I was like personally, I think I was prepared. Because as a scientist, our expectations are low.
No.
Things take studies take a long time. We don't expect things to happen quickly. But for the shows, everything had to happen so quickly. And so I was used to the stress of the shows, and the book, the pace of the book is it took us 10 years, over 10 years to write the book. So the pace of the book, we had more time. The stress that you're talking about, or maybe that feeling, I had every time when we were filming.
So it was normal.
So luckily I was able to mostly avoid that with the writing because it just was we had more time.
Well, in that particular chapter, it reflected that stress pretty well. And we can give away a little stories in the book here and there. I don't want to give away the ending, but it's okay to tell some stories. I'd be remiss not to talk about the catfish that eat pigeons. I think everyone wants to talk about that. So tell us about these catfish.
The catfish that eat pigeons, it's a Wells catfish. It's Europe's largest freshwater fish. It is native to Eastern Europe, but has been introduced into Western Europe primarily by anglers for fishing.
So they can catch it.
And so, there's a famous story of a German angler who put 30 baby Wells catfish in the trunk of his VW Bug. And do VW Bugs have trunks? Was the car.
It's in the front.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he put it in the front of his car.
Trunk,
and took 30 baby Wells catfish to the Ebro River in Spain and released them. And what's happened in Western Europe now is every year since those initial introductions, the fish just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. This happens a lot when fish are introduced into new places. They take advantage, a big predator, and there's lots of fish that aren't used to them, and they just eat everything. So these wells kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And in one location, which is in Albi, it's a town of Albi, if I'm remembering this right, in France, southern France, there's a bridge. It's beautiful old city, medieval city, and there's this old bridge over the river, and the pigeons come down. It's right in downtown. They'll fly around and then they land on these gravel bars below the bridge, and all the Wells catfish sit at the edge of these gravel bars. And when the pigeons come to bathe, the Wells will come out of the water and take the pigeons. And it wasn't exactly what I imagined because it all happens like in slow motion. It's like a comedy of errors because the pigeons are bathing, they're oblivious. The Wells are not very good. at catching the pigeons. And so the pigeons will be bathing, the whales will come up and try to take it. The pigeon half the time doesn't even know what's going on.
And they come right back and take a bath again.
It's like, oh my God, it's hard. It's hard to watch. And so the Wells catfish they're very, they adapt. They're very adaptive feeders. I don't know what the correct term is, but they
opportunistic.
Are opportunistic. That's the word exactly. They're opportunistic feeders, and they've learned to feed on pigeons. They'll eat almost anything. They have they're crazy. They're actually kind of a beautiful looking fish. Their coloration and everything, but they have a huge head and a huge mouth, and then a body that kind of tapers and is slender. But they get. I think the biggest one I've heard of is about 350 pounds, but they get big, and they just keep growing. In Western Europe, the water is warmer. There's more food, and a lot of the fishing. They're not traditionally eaten in Western Europe. And so a lot of the fishing is catch and release. And so there's nothing to really keep them in check in a lot of these rivers where they've been introduced.
Yeah. Now, there was part of your book that kind of ruined my day. I was disappointed in the outcome of the Loch Ness Monster. You kind of wrecked that for us. Tell us a little bit about your Loch Ness experience. Excuse me.
I have mixed feelings about this. So I've seen a lot of these big fish, and in a lot of places, we'll catch a big fish, big giant catfish or giant freshwater ray. I'm trying to think of other times when this has happened, and a crowd will gather when one of these fish is caught of local people, and the local people, it will be the first time that they've ever seen one of these fish. So, this is a long way of saying, like, the stories, every big river and lake has a story of some aquatic beast that live. I'm near Lake Tahoe, and we have Tahoe Tessie, which is probably for tourism purposes.
Yeah.
But anyway, real stories. Most large rivers and lakes have real stories that have old stories of these aquatic beasts that live in these bodies of water. And my opinion, I guess it does ruin it a little bit, but my opinion is, a lot of people have never even seen these unbelievably large fish that actually do live in these rivers. So it's very easy for me to imagine that, yes, we have this idea of Loch Ness and the stories associated with Loch Ness and the fact that it might be an undescribed animal. But the reason I don't find it disappointing is the reality is there probably are undescribed giant animals out there. Mm-hmm. Like, it does exist. It just doesn't exist. And this, again, my personal opinion, it does exist. It just doesn't exist in the way that we may imagine it, exactly the way that we may imagine it.
Right. Well, I felt sad after reading that. Anyway, so you have a background talking a lot about dams and the impact dams have on fishes. I used to work at a fish ladder in New Hampshire as an educator, so I have a lot of similar background. Are dams one of your big? Let me rephrase that. Obviously I want to talk about dams, but what do you think are the biggest factors impacting freshwater fishes, globally?
Big freshwater fish, dams are a huge impact. And one of the reasons dams a lot of times have such negative impact is that they're going in. So they went in North America a long time ago and had serious impact on our salmon and sturgeon populations. So they're really impacting, they impact all fish for a variety of reasons, but fish, anadromous fish that are migrating long distances, they're blocking migrations, they're disrupting downstream dispersal of young. And then also they really facilitate invasive species. So you have a lot of dams, it creates these environments where non-native species tend to do really well, generalist species. I don't know if
this happens worldwide. Like in New Hampshire, for example, which I'm going to speak to a little bit, back in the 1800s, 1890s, up to about early 1920s, we put over 3,000 dams in our state, wiping out the game fish population entirely. not just this migratory fish, but everything else as well. And then they did what's called the bassing of New Hampshire, which is they went down south and they grabbed all the bass and pumpkin seeds and bluegills they could find and threw them in all the lakes. Then they went out west and they put rainbow trout on trains and brought them in, dumped them in our lakes. They went to Germany and brought brown trout over, and they just started throwing fish in the water to see what would stay. Is that the normal, like everywhere where dams are?
Yeah, a lot of places. And I mean, I grew up fishing for rainbow trout, bluegill, channel catfish, small ones, maybe they were bullhead or something. Anyway, I didn't know. Like, I thought those were the normal fish. You know, I thought that those fish were from that pond where I was fishing or that stream. And that's the experience a lot of us have is we grow up fishing for non-natives and don't even a lot of times realize they're non-native. And yeah, so that does happen around the world. What's really right now, what's happening in a lot of places, or why their dams are having such a big impact, especially now, is that dams are going in on a lot of big tropical rivers. So Amazon, Congo, Mekong, those are the three most diverse in terms of fish diversity, highest fish diversity in the world. And so these big dams are starting to go in places where there are a lot of different kinds of fish. And so they'll very likely have the same impacts they had in North America, but that's occurring now in rivers that have thousands of species of fish. So, I mean, hopefully we can avoid the worst outcomes, but you can sort of see where it's headed.
Right. That impoundment is going to make a big difference in those fishes. And we don't know the outcome. Well, we do. We can guess the outcome, but we don't know what's going to happen. You might end up with some weird fish that get bigger, a lot of fish that just die out, and just blocking their migration is just the biggest thing.
Yeah. One weird thing that's happened in the Mekong just the last few years, and I haven't formally studied it, but there is an endangered fish, a cool looking fish called a Laotian shad, which is a shad-shaped fish, shiny silver scales, but with gold and black spots. And up until recently, you would never, it's very, very rare. And the last couple of years, it's everywhere. And part of me thinks that somehow, because there have been some dams that have gone in, shads sometimes can do well in reservoirs. And I don't know what's really going on, but part of me thinks it could be one of the changes that we're seeing, the first wave of changes that we're seeing as a result of these dams. And they'll be unexpected. So we've already seen the loss of a lot of the classic kind of river species, but maybe for whatever reason, the shad benefited from the reservoirs.
Yeah, I guess you can't know until you do it, but you probably shouldn't do it. So
yeah.
You can avoid it all altogether. Is there any hope for avoiding getting those dams built? Or is there an organization, any groups trying to stop it?
Well, it's playing out all over the world, and every place where there's a dam going in, there's some level of debate. But what tends to happen is in more kind of autocratic countries, decisions are made without like an environmental risk assessment or without considering environmental impacts or the impacts on the people, like local people that are living in the area. And then you have other places, like, for example, there's a big dam building boom right now in the Balkans. And in Albania, I hope I'm going to get this story right, but in Albania, there's a big debate over whether or not dams should be built in every river. And one of their, called the Vjosa River, has just been designated as a river national park, which is a specific mechanism to protect the Vjosa, kind of recognizing it as one of the last like special free-flowing rivers in this region. So the debate and what's happening sort of is it plays out differently everywhere, and it depends on politics. It depends on our knowledge. One of the things, I work a lot in Southeast Asia in the Mekong. We're constantly trying to learn as much as we can about the fish so that when these decisions are made, they're not made kind of out of ignorance. Dams very likely are still going to get built in a lot of these spots, but at least it won't be because like, I don't know exactly how to say it, but at least the information will be there to.
Right. So if they're going to do it, they're going to know in advance they're going to hurt something, and they can make that decision knowing what they're getting into. Are they building these dams primarily for hydroelectric?
Yeah. The big ones. Yeah.
The big ones.
Hydroelectricity. And Laos is building a lot of dams right now, and Laos is landlocked. It's, developing economically, looking for opportunities. And so hydropower is viewed by the government as one way to get some economic benefit. And so there are winners and losers. And unfortunately, I think for the fish, I think the fish will be on the losing end. But yeah, it's for hydroelectric power. The Cambodian government, again, that's why I say this is playing out differently depending on where we're talking about. But the Cambodian government has made a proclamation, or sort of agreed not to build main stem dams on the Mekong. So every country is dealing with it a little bit differently. And, as alternative energy becomes cheaper and there are other options, the amount of hydropower development may decrease.
Well, let's hope it does. I know there's trending now in North America to start removing dams. So I'm hoping that we keep moving in that direction. All right. So cycling back to the book, I'm going to just kind of ask you a couple easy ones for you. Besides catching the largest fish, or be able to measure the largest fish, which I'll give away, was 661 pounds. I won't tell people what the fish was. And then compared to 646-pound Mekong catfish. So it was just a little bigger. But besides that fish, what were some of the more interesting places you visited around the world? I mean, you went so many places in this book.
The spot that jumps out immediately is Guyana.
Mm-hmm.
And Guyana is a small country, northern South America. And the southern part of Guyana is pristine rainforest, managed by indigenous communities. And the diversity in every sense of the word. The fish in Guyana blew my mind. You have Payara, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with Payara, but it's the vampire fish. So it has the 2-inch long fangs.
Jesus.
There are wolffish, which are also called giant aymara, mm-hmm. which are almost like a snake head, but have canine teeth. God. There are electric eels, several species of catfish that get over 100 pounds, peacock bass. So that it's all kinds of fish. And I'm mostly familiar with work in Asia, and in Asia we don't have the predators and I was surprised in Guyana by the beauty of the fish, but also the number of the weapons the fish have, like the number of different ways they can hurt you. Not that they would, piranha are everywhere. So there's piranha, wolffish, vampire fish, several species of freshwater stingray, electric eel. And when you get into these remote areas that haven't been fished heavily, there are fish everywhere. So I'm used to, you're lucky, if you catch one. Mm-hmm. But in Guyana, the fish were everywhere, healthy populations, big fish, all of these predators. We couldn't keep fish in the water. Like if we caught one, we couldn't keep it in the water, not release it immediately. The piranha would just come in and devour it.
While you're holding it?
Not while we're holding it, just if we left it. Like if we had it in like a little, sometimes we keep it on the line or whatever, and you couldn't do that. And I still don't fully understand the way piranha operate, because we would swim in those rivers and we would bathe and we never had any problems. But if you put a piece of bait or a defenseless fish or anything, in seconds the piranha would be on it. So I don't know exactly how they sense their prey, but they're a fascinating fish. And the biggest challenge in fishing in Guyana was actually the piranha, because that's all. Right,
you have to get your bait past the piranha.
Yeah, we would try fishing at night. We would try fishing with big weights to seemed like the piranha weren't down really deep, so we'd try to get down deep. So there were a few tricks, but I just wasn't used to it.
It's funny. I've experienced the same thing trying to catch a goldfish. Believe it or not, I was trying to. The goldfish is one of the fish on my list in New Hampshire fishes, and the place I knew they had them also had lots of catfish and bass and other fish, and I was using the tiniest hooks and the tiniest things, and all these pesky other fish just kept getting in the way, and you do start getting creative. And I did some of the same tricks you did for tiny fish that you're doing for the big fishes. How do I avoid these fish and trying to outthink them? And you just trial and error your way through it, I bet.
Yeah. And speaking of eating fish, almost everything we do is catch and release, but piranha tastes pretty good. We ended up eating quite a few piranhas.
I was going to say, I'd have no trouble eating those piranhas.
Yeah. Well,
easy meal.
You'd think a fish, I don't know, I'm used to associating like that kind of fish with something that also doesn't taste good, because if it's that abundant, how could a fish taste good and still be that abundant? But they were everywhere and they tasted great.
I'll tell you a secret about fish. So you probably don't know this because you probably don't eat all the kinds of fish I've eaten, but minnows, the family fish of minnows, some of the best tasting fish I've ever eaten. For the little like even common shiners and fall fish, just nice white flaky meat, and up through carp, just delicious meat. And I was thinking about why are they so good. And I was thinking, well, every fish eats them, so they must be delicious. Every other animal wants these fish, so why not humans? Because they're delicious.
So, someone the other day told me that suckers are good, and it might have been a specific certain kind of sucker, and I can't remember the context of the story, but I was surprised by that.
Yeah, well, I've read a lot of recipes about sucker. We ate the long-nosed sucker and the white sucker, and I found the taste of the meat to be just fine. It tastes like most other fish. But because we caught them in warm water, the texture was just mushy. So I think if we had other stuff with it, we just breaded and fried it, so it wasn't fancy cooking, and it wasn't great. Suckers were not my favorite.
Yeah. So when we're down in South America, like most other places, I'm trying to think, but most other places we filmed and where I've done research, we don't eat the fish. But in South America, it's an expedition, so you're out for a couple weeks and you're camping and on the river. And in those cases, that's what people do, is they eat fish from the river.
Otherwise, you got to bring all the provisions in if you're not getting food from the land. So you might as well.
So piranha and peacock bass were both, and arapaima actually. We didn't eat wild arapaima because it's a big aquaculture species as well. But all of those three fish were delicious. Yeah,
turns out fish are delicious. That's kind of the takeaway there. All right, getting back to your book, Chasing Giants. Again, congratulations! Really fun quest you're on with this fish. I do want to talk about Nile perch for a minute. Those are one of the scariest, like my nightmare fish. When I think about Nile perches, they scare the hell out of me. Tell us about your Nile perch experience.
Yeah, maybe I can get you over your fear. So Nile perch, we fished in Uganda, and we were fishing just below Murchison Falls. So the thing that was scary about that was that there were crocodiles everywhere. Mm-hmm. So, and we were fishing below the falls, and so the water was foamy. I'm not sure where the foam came from, but it was, the big falls, but there was something in the water that was creating foam. And so we were fishing down below the foam and catching the fish and bringing them in. And we were fishing on a rocky bank where there was no easy way to like get down in the water. And we also didn't want to take the fish out of the water. So I was terrified. I wasn't terrified of the Nile perch. I was terrified of crocs the whole time.
I wouldn't have thought of crocs. Yeah.
Yeah. And we couldn't see anything. The reason that you shouldn't be afraid of Nile perch is that they are, every fish, you've had experience with this. Every fish deals with capture differently. Nile perch are one of the most delicate fish. You really have to baby them.
Really? They look so tough.
They didn't deal with capture. And sturgeon, taimen, catfish, we all have experience, snakehead. Some fish don't seem to be bothered at all. And as long as you're relatively, responsible with them, we caught one sturgeon. It was tagged. It had been caught 27 times previous to the time that were recorded. So probably been caught many more than that, but 27 previous recaptures. So fish like sturgeon do great with catch and release, but Nile perch, they were very delicate.
I find that shocking. They just look so intimidating,
Yeah. Sometimes the way fish look, and I mean, alligator gar fall in this category where they're such kind of fearsome mean looking fish. And my experience, their personality is not that way at all. So I guess can't judge a book by its cover.
No, when you see gar in the water, they're just so slow moving and deliberate and in control. I was fishing down in New Orleans with a guide, and there were garfish all around the boat, and he wouldn't let me catch them because he didn't want them in the boat because they would stink his boat up. But we were catching redfish, which were fine, but I wanted to eat a gar, and he just wouldn't have it. I could not talk him into letting me catch one. So.
Well, he didn't want to try. He didn't want to scale it.
Right. Those giant.
I mean, yeah, huge, tough scales.
Huge, tough scales. Well, Zeb, I feel like I could talk to you all day, but I'm going to let you go. But I do want to remind people your book, Chasing Giants, is coming out, April 20, right around the corner here, April.
Yeah, so the official
25th.
date of publication is April 25th, but I'll let your listeners in on a little secret.
Yeah.
It is available right now on Amazon. You can get it tomorrow or the next day if you're Amazon, Prime or whatever.
How cool is that?
The best place to get it is Amazon. It's available now. I really appreciate your interest and hope your listeners enjoy the book.
Well, thank you so much, Zeb. That's Zeb Hogan, author of Chasing Giants. Just wrapped up his epic angling quest. It took him 10 years to find the largest freshwater fish in the world, and I won't tell you what it is because you have to read the book, Chasing Giants, to find it. It's really cool. Congratulations, Zeb.
Thanks so much.
Cool. And thank you, Zeb Hogan. And in case you didn't catch it, Zeb Hogan is a research biologist at the University of Nevada, Reno, and the United Nations Convention of Migratory Species scientific counselor for fish. He's a fish counselor. Hogan hosts National Geographic's television series Monster Fish, and his research focuses on migratory fish ecology, fisheries management, and endangered species issues. So, again, check that book out right now. Chasing Giants, available anywhere you get your books. Amazon's got it right now for you, so you can check that out now. So that's it. You've listened to a bunch of fish nerds when you should have been fishing. Big thank you to the world's deepest fish. Big thanks to Zeb Hogan for giving us time today. And thank you to Wally Pleasant for our opening theme music, and to Diane's Bath Salts for giving us our news theme. So until next time, follow the code of the fish nerds, spawn early and often. Never trust a freelance with strings attached, and swim against the current every chance you get. That's it. You made a podcast with me.
Whether you're fly fishing in a stream, getting those ankles wet, or deep in the ocean, casting nets, fish nerds. Fish nerds. Fish nerds. It's a podcast. Just for the halibut! Fried in a basket or broiled in a pan. Eat it raw like you're in Siam. Fish nerds. Fish nerds. Fish nerds. It's a podcast.